At first glance, it looks like nothing special. A small brown coin, darkened by time. The surface feels tired, almost exhausted, like it has carried too many stories for one piece of metal to hold. The edges are softened. Lincoln's face is no longer sharp. The wheat stalks on the back feel distant, like echoes from another America. Dirt sits deep in the lines, refusing to leave. To most people, this 1937 Lincoln wheat penny is just an old cent, something you'd toss aside. Something you'd never look at twice. But history doesn't care what something looks like. History hides inside it. This penny was born during one of the hardest chapters America has ever faced. The Great Depression was not just an economic crash. It was a fight for survival. Families counted pennies like lifelines. 1 cent could mean bread. 1 cent could mean hope. This was a time when money wasn't about wealth, it was about staying alive. And this exact coin, struck with solid copper, moved through that world. It passed through hands that were shaking with fear. It sat in pockets of men who had lost jobs, and children who had learned what hunger felt like too early. Every scratch on this penny was earned. Unlike modern pennies, this coin is not a cheap imitation. It is real copper. Heavy for its size. Honest metal from a time when coins were meant to last. The U.S. Mint didn't know this penny would outlive generations. They didn't know it would survive wars, booms, collapses, and revolutions and money itself. They only knew that America needed cents, millions of them, to keep moving. And yet, while millions were struck, very few survived the way this one did. Dirty. Worn. Still here. This penny traveled when cars were rare and radios were new. It witnessed the end of the Depression and the slow return of hope. It may have paid for newspapers announcing recovery, or coffee shared between strangers trying to rebuild their lives. When World War II arrived, copper became valuable. Pennies like this disappeared. Melted. Hoarded. Lost. But some, like this one, escaped. Quietly. Accidentally. And that survival is where the mystery begins. Collectors understand something most people don't. Value is not always about shine. Sometimes, where tells the better story. Heavy circulation proves a coin lived. It moved. It mattered. A dirty, worn 1937 wheat penny can carry more historical weight than a perfect one locked away. And in rare cases, very rare cases, certain pennies from this era hide secrets. Small minting quirks. Subtle dieware. Unnoticed variations that only time revealed. These are the details that can turn an ignored cent into something powerful. Stories circulate in the collecting world. Quiet ones. About pennies found in jars, drawers, even sidewalks. Coins that looked worthless until someone looked closer. Not every 1937 penny is valuable, but some become legends. Especially those that survived harsh circulation without being destroyed. Especially those that carry unusual traits shaped by the machines, the pressure, the era. That's why experienced collectors say the same thing over and over again: never rush to spend an old penny. Because this coin represents something bigger than money. It represents endurance. It represents an America that refused to break. In today's world of digital numbers and invisible money, this penny is physical proof that survival once had weight. That hope once fit in your hand. And when collectors talk about fortunes being hidden in plain sight, this is exactly what they mean. Not instant riches, but overlooked power. In today's market, imagination collides with reality. While most worn wheat pennies remain modest in value, the rarest stories drive people to search endlessly. Auctions, private deals, whispered discoveries. One overlooked coin can change someone's life, not because every penny is magic, but because the right one, in the right moment, can rewrite a future. That belief alone keeps millions of people searching. So if you ever find a 1937 Lincoln wheat penny, dark with age and heavy with history, stop. Don't clean it. Don't dismiss it. Don't spend it without understanding what you're holding. Because sometimes the smallest coin carries the heaviest story. And sometimes history hides its power in the places no one thinks to look. This penny doesn't promise riches. It promises possibility. And in the world of coin collecting, possibility is everything. At first glance, it looks ordinary. A dark brown penny. Small. Lightweight. Easy to ignore. The surface is rough, uneven, tired from decades of use. Lincoln's face is worn down by time, his expression softened by countless hands that never stop to look. The edges are smooth, almost melted by circulation. To most people, this 1944 Lincoln penny is nothing more than loose change from another era. Something forgotten in jars. Something passed over without a second thought. But history has a way of hiding its most powerful stories inside the smallest objects. This coin was born in the middle of global chaos. The year was 1944. World War II was at its peak. America was fully mobilized. Factories worked day and night. Men were overseas. Families waited in silence. Metal was no longer just metal, it was strategy, survival, and sacrifice. Every ounce mattered. Copper was needed for bullets, wiring, and weapons. Even pennies were affected by war. Just 1 year earlier, the U.S. Mint had stripped copper away entirely, producing steel pennies to save material for the battlefield. Those coins felt cold. Temporary. Unfamiliar. America knew they weren't meant to last. Then came 1944. And with it, a quiet but powerful shift. The copper returned. But not in the way people expected. The metal used to strike these 1944 pennies didn't come fresh from mines alone. It came from war itself. Reclaimed. Recycled. Melted down from spent shell casings and military scrap. Pieces of conflict transformed into everyday money. Bullets that once roared across battlefields were reborn as cents that passed through grocery stores, gas stations, and factory pay envelopes. This penny didn't just witness history. It was forged from it. The San Francisco Mint struck these coins while the war still raged. The S-Mint mark on the reverse quietly marks a city that worked non-stop to support the Pacific Front. These pennies entered circulation immediately. No ceremony. No pause. They were needed. They moved fast. They traveled far. And they were used hard. That's why so many surviving examples today are worn, dirty, heavily circulated. The wear is not damage. It is proof of service. This coin may have bought bread for a family with a son overseas. It may have been dropped into donation boxes for war bonds. It may have rattled in the pocket of a factory worker building aircraft, or a child collecting scrap metal for the war effort. Every scratch tells a story of movement. Of urgency. Of a nation that couldn't afford to slow down. This penny lived in a time when money wasn't about saving, it was about surviving together. Collectors understand that coins like this are more than face value. They are time capsules. And the 1944 Lincoln penny holds a unique place in American memory. It marks the return to copper. It marks resilience. It marks transformation. Even in heavily circulated condition, its story remains intact. Sometimes, the dirt enhances the truth. Sometimes, wear makes the story louder. And then there is the mystery that keeps people searching. Not every 1944 penny is rare. Not every one is valuable. But history has taught collectors to never assume. War-era coins are unpredictable. Small variations. Subtle differences. Unexpected metal compositions. Errors born from rushed production and exhausted machinery. In times of pressure, mistakes happen. And in numismatics, mistakes can become legends. That's why these pennies are examined so closely today. Why people weigh them. Listen to their sound. Study their surfaces under light. Because hidden among ordinary survivors, there are always a few coins that refuse to be ordinary. Coins that slip through systems. Coins that weren't meant to exist exactly as they do. And when those coins surface, the results can be shocking. Stories circulate quietly about pennies found in old boxes, in inherited collections, in forgotten coffee cans. Coins dismissed for decades that suddenly changed lives when someone finally looked closer. These stories aren't guarantees. They're possibilities. And possibility is what fuels the obsession. The idea that something so small could carry unimaginable value grips the human mind. The thought that a single penny, once made from the remnants of war, could today command attention, competition, and life-changing money is powerful. It turns pocket change into potential. It turns history into opportunity. That's why experienced collectors repeat the same warning again and again. Don't clean it. Don't rush to sell it. Don't assume you know its worth. Because the moment you erase its surface, you erase clues. And clues are everything. Especially for coins born in times when America was stretched to its limits. This penny survived a world war. It survived inflation, modernization, and the disappearance of copper from everyday money. It survived being overlooked. And now, decades later, it asks a quiet question of anyone who holds it. Do you really know what you have? In a world obsessed with fast money and instant rewards, this coin stands as a reminder. Wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it looks worn, dirty, and ordinary until the right eyes finally see it. So if a 1944 Lincoln penny ever crosses your path, pause. Feel its weight. Remember where it came from. Remember what it was made of. And remember that history doesn't lose its power just because time has passed. Some fortunes don't shout. They whisper. And the smartest move is knowing when not to spend. At first glance, it looks harmless. Small. Brown. Quiet. A simple wheat penny with softened edges and a surface darkened by time. Lincoln's face is still there, but the sharp lines are gone, smoothed by decades of circulation. To most people, the 1951 Lincoln wheat penny feels ordinary. Just another old coin from another time. Something you might toss aside without thinking. But this coin was born at a very specific moment in American history, a moment that reshaped the country forever. The year was 1951. America was no longer fighting World War II, but the echoes of war were everywhere. Soldiers had come home. Families were rebuilding. Cities were expanding outward. Suburbs were forming almost overnight. Factories that once produced tanks and ammunition were now producing cars, refrigerators, and dreams. This was the early heartbeat of the baby boomer era, a time when America believed the future would always be bigger, better, and brighter than the past. This penny entered circulation during a time of confidence. Wages were rising. Jobs were plentiful. The middle class was exploding. People didn't save pennies the way they once had during the Depression. Money moved fast. It flowed through diners, gas stations, grocery stores, and movie theaters. Coins like this one worked hard. They were handled daily, spent without hesitation, passed from hand to hand across a rapidly growing nation. The S Mint mark tells its own story. Struck at the San Francisco Mint, this penny came from the western edge of America, a region symbolizing opportunity, expansion, and post-war ambition. California was booming. Highways stretched outward. New homes rose where fields once stood. This penny traveled through that transformation. It jingled in pockets during road trips. It slid across counters in corner stores. It lived inside a country in motion. And that motion left its mark. Most surviving 1951 wheat pennies today are worn, dirty, heavily circulated. The surfaces tell you everything you need to know. This was not a coin people saved. It was a coin people used. The wear isn't a flaw, it's a signature of the era. Every scratch is evidence of economic growth. Every softened detail is proof that this penny did its job when America needed it to. But history has a way of changing value over time. What was once common can become uncommon. What was once ignored can become desirable. And what was once dismissed can suddenly be questioned. Collectors understand this better than anyone. They know that coins from transitional periods, moments between hardship and prosperity, often hide unexpected stories. The early 1950s were exactly that. A transition. Behind the scenes, the U.S. Mint was operating under pressure. Demand for coinage was massive. Population growth was explosive. Production had to keep pace. And whenever speed meets volume, small inconsistencies appear. Subtle differences in strike quality. Minor die wear. Tiny variations that meant nothing at the time, but mean everything decades later. That's why the 1951's wheat penny is still searched for today. Not because every example is worth a fortune, but because history teaches collectors never to assume. Coins from this era have surprised people before. Pennies pulled from old jars. From inherited collections. From forgotten drawers. Coins that sat unnoticed for generations until someone finally looked closer. Weighed them. Studied them. Asked the right questions. And in rare cases, those questions led to answers worth far more than anyone expected. That possibility is what gives this penny its power. The idea that a coin once used to buy a newspaper or a cup of coffee could today command attention, competition, and serious money is hard to ignore. It challenges the way people think about value. It reminds us that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently, hidden inside objects everyone else has already forgotten. This penny also marks the end of something important. The wheat reverse would soon disappear. By 1959, the Lincoln Memorial would replace it, closing a chapter that began in 1909. The 1951's sits close to that ending, part of the final generation of true wheat pennies that witnessed America's rise from hardship to dominance. When you hold this coin, you're holding more than copper. You're holding optimism, expansion, confidence. A nation convinced that tomorrow would always be better than today. That belief is embedded in the metal itself. And that's why experienced collectors give the same advice over and over. Don't clean it. Don't rush to sell it. Don't assume you understand its value just by looking at it. Because once you alter a coin, you erase its story. And with coins like this, the story is everything. The 1951's Lincoln wheat penny doesn't scream rarity. It whispers history. It survived a period when America moved too fast to look back. It survived being spent, ignored, and worn down. And now, decades later, it waits, quietly, for someone to finally ask the right question. What if this isn't just a penny? What if it's a survivor of America's greatest economic transformation? What if the smallest coins carry the biggest stories? Sometimes, fortunes don't appear overnight. Sometimes, they wait inside the past. And sometimes, the smartest move is knowing not to spend.